Ladies and gentlemen, in this session of Seminar Hall 2, we are going to be having two events. The first one is a talk on biodiversity and conservation. Biodiversity in Wikipedia. You may not be knowing, but Wikipedia plays a very important role in providing information about the fauna and flora of India to Indians. If you take the average bird book, which contains images or photographs or descriptions of all Indian birds, 1200 species, it doesn't cost anything less than 600-800 rupees. And there are works which are far costlier. So that was just birds. What about animals, butterflies, fish, frogs, reptiles, amphibians? You get the idea. If you want, as a person who loves Indian nature, want to make a library, you can't make a complete library of it. Firstly, because the books are, you can spend, on all topics are not been made. But if you try to collect what has been made, you won't be spending less than 10,000 bucks. In such a scenario, how do you expect Indians to come to know about their wildlife and flora? So in that sense, things are really bad out there because there are huge cost barriers which keep away information about our own country to our countrymen. This is where Wikipedia comes in as an absolute low cost, high value platform to people who, while they may not be able to purchase the books, yet will get access of information about these things through Wikipedia. Mr. Shamal will be talking about this. Shamal is what I like to call a polyglot. He is interested in many things. He is an entomologist, he is an ornithologist, he has published papers in peer-reviewed journals. He is also quite a good digital artist. He makes a lot of SVG images and has contributed more than 2,000 images to Commons. He is an amateur historian in his own right. And today, he will be speaking about the linkages between biodiversity and Wikipedia, which is a really, really important subject and which can take the case of conservation ahead even further. After Shamal, we will be having Wiki Quiz by Riaz. More about that later. Over to Shamal.
Thank you, Ashwin. Well, I don't think I'm a polyglot. I speak very few languages. Maybe you meant polymath, which I'm not.
Polymath, not polyglot.
Anyway, polymath I'm not. So what I would like to talk about is my own experience with Wikipedia, which is not so much about using Wikipedia as a consumer, but using Wikipedia as a tool for learning as well as sharing my learning. So when I contribute to Wikipedia, it's typically because I was ignorant before it, and I found Wikipedia equally ignorant. And when I learn something, I share my learning on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia improves, and I don't lose anything. It's not like I'm spending time to improve Wikipedia. Okay, so my talk was titled Indian Biodiversity. I didn't want to change the title, but I've decided to change the grammar, and I put Indian inside quotations because biodiversity knows no boundaries. Plants and animals don't have boundaries. They don't fight about maps, for instance. Okay, so I'll start with this. This picture that you have on the screen is a large moth. It's about the size of your two open palms. It landed up in front of my house one day, and I didn't know what it was. I had a picture of it. I sent it to entomologists in the university where I studied. They said it could be this. And then we looked at the literature, and the literature said this can't occur here because there was one German expert who studied this genus, and he thinks that it's found only along the Himalayas. And I found it somewhere in the Western Ghats. So we discussed on an online discussion group about moths, and we found out that the British Museum of Natural History actually has a moth of this species, and it was collected in somewhere near Bombay, but nobody has published information stating that it's actually found in the Western Ghats. And I found this further down south in Moodigere, which is in the Karnataka Western Ghats. So I decided to add this photograph to Wikimedia Commons, and it now decorates an article on this particular moth. It's a kind of moon moth. You can see those long tail. Okay, so a brief introduction to what I do on Wikipedia. I joined Wikipedia in 2002, and frankly, I never thought it would actually be a success. So I went and created a few stubby articles on things that I knew and didn't exist on Wikipedia. Nothing happened, and I forgot about Wikipedia. And then in 2004, I went to a conference about biodiversity. And Professor Madhav Gadgil, who was running was part of the conference, he was pointing out to various people that we could do something like Wikipedia. And he pointed out that Wikipedia is so good on mathematics articles, why can't we do something like that? So when I went back, I decided that Wikipedia could actually be used. I mean, you don't have to start a new site like Wikipedia. And the policies of Wikipedia were perfectly fine to make use of as it is. So come 2005, I got on and started. It was also in 2002, you had dial-up and there was no broadband. And then in 2005, I rediscovered broadband. And then since then, I've been contributing on a near daily basis, small tidbits that I can. So the result is I've been, most people count themselves in terms of number of edits, which doesn't really make sense because a lot of time you're spending a huge amount of time researching stuff and then you're just doing one edit and the amount of time that goes behind it is not measured. So anyway, here's an indication of what Wikipedia knows about me. According to this, I edit 75% in the article namespace, which makes me what is called an exopedian. An exopedian is one who is not socializing on the internet, on Wikipedia. So there are some people who just go to talk pages and say, hi, how are you? And I'm not doing that enough. And then you have this graph of how my activity goes from time on in time slots of every 15 minutes on each weekday. And you can see that I'm actually a weekend contributor to Wikipedia most of the time. And if you notice here, it shows that I still have a bit of social life on Sundays. Yeah, so one of the things that I learned very early on is something that is taught in library science. It's a statement from a person named Samuel Johnson. Anybody know who Samuel Johnson is? What's he famous for? Yeah, Samuel Johnson was the writer of the first English dictionary. Until then, people spoke English. They never actually decided to list out all the words. So this guy decided to make a list. Okay, so Samuel Johnson said, knowledge is of two kinds. We know a subject ourselves, or we know where we can find information upon it. Okay, and my knowledge is essentially of the second kind. So I know a bit about certain subjects, but oftentimes you don't really know, so you go and look it up. So where you look it up is what makes your kind of knowledge slightly different. So to briefly, India is extremely biodiversity rich. So biodiversity includes plants, animals, viruses, fungi, the fishes in the sea, and things like that. So the biodiversity in the Indian region is extremely rich. In fact, there's a classification of things called hotspots, and India has 2 hotspots of 7 in the world. Okay, so there's one in the Western Ghats, and there's one in northeastern India. So that richness is actually a result of the history of the Indian subcontinent. So I have on the screen an animation. Maybe you've seen it in a different form in your school textbooks. So what actually happened is, we know this from fossil evidence and geological evidence, that there was a southern continent, and India was, what we call India today, was a little part stuck next to Antarctica, it was stuck to Australia, it was stuck to Madagascar, Africa, and there were organisms that were walking across, there were plants that were growing across, and this little large continent was called Gondwana land. And I don't know how many of you have heard of Gondwana? Yeah, so Gondwana land is actually named after the Gonds or the Khonds in Orissa. So in that area there was a fossil called Glossopteris. It was a kind of plant which looked like a fern but produced seeds. And these fossils were found in India, they were found in Australia, they were found in Africa. So based on that, they decided that all these continents were stuck at some point of time, and then India drifted away. So what you see in this picture is how India moved on, and somewhere around 45 million years ago, we hit the northern continent, and we went down from the southern hemisphere into the northern hemisphere. And the Himalayas rose, and then we set up new weather systems. There was a large-scale sea breeze called the monsoon, and then there were organisms that came in from the old Gondwana land. There were organisms that had diversified in the northern continent, and then they walked into the Indian continent, and there was an influx of various groups. And then much later on, of course, the humans came into the scene, and humans came in multiple waves. We had people coming in from the Polynesia, we had people coming in from the north, we had people coming in from other parts, and then we have colonized, and we have different ethnicities mixed into India. Okay. So it's interesting that somewhere around 65 million years, that's about 15 million years ago, before we hit the Asian continent and produced, there was also an extinction event. 65 million years ago, nearly all life on Earth was wiped out. It's not known really how it happened. Some people think it was due to something that happened in the Bombay area. I'm not joking. So, and it was the Deccan Traps. So if you go down between Bombay and Pune, you see these hills that are looking like staircases. So those are called the Deccan Traps. So this is the largest volcanic event in the history of the Earth. So geologists consider it a brief event of about 1 million years of volcanic flow. Okay, it's brief by geological time scales, but just imagine 1 million years of volcano flowing in bursts and forming these staircase-like structures. So actually, the Deccan Trap, the trap is derived from the Swedish word for steps. So what you call the Deccan Traps has nothing to do with traps. And there are suggestions that there was also a meteor impact. There are suggestions that the oil that you get in Bombay High are actually a result of some of the biodiversity of that time getting trapped under a meteor impact and going undersea. So thanks to the movement into the northern hemisphere and near the equator, India also set up a large-scale sea breeze, which means the monsoon system is actually a large-scale sea breeze. And so we set up a very peculiar weather pattern for millions of years, and all the creatures that have evolved in India, on the Indian continent, are coexisted peacefully with lots of large animals. In fact, some recent research has shown that as humans colonized various parts of the world, the first thing that they did was wiped out all the big animals. It's said that China is supposed to have had 5 elephant-sized animals until humans landed up on the scene. So we have been killing all the animals. But it's surprising that India is the last home of the tiger, the last home of the elephant. And we have a history of managing to live without treating animals as competition. And then when the British came in, they also started this idea of preserving forests for economic purposes. Okay, so in fact, forestry developed in India. And biodiversity means a lot to lots of people. To some of us, it just might look like a pretty bird singing in the morning. It might be your breakfast. It might be your only sustenance in life. And in fact, if you look at the latest Human Development indices released for 2011, you will notice that there's something called a multiple spectrum poverty indicator. So although Indians, especially those who are living in forests, often don't even deal with money, they live a very rich life, and it's all possible because they get their firewood, they get clean water, they get their food from the forest, they get lots of things, and they live a life which is not really poor in the sense of the economic term of poverty. But this has changed when you look at urban poverty. It's very different. So, biodiversity is wealth. And except sometimes when you have mosquitoes biting you, or when you fall sick due to a bacterial infection. So that's when you don't think of biodiversity as being particularly important. And the situation with India is that the life forms that were in India have been studied for a very, very long time. In 1678, there were big tomes of books written on the wealth of India. So the picture I have on the left is a gentleman named Hendrik van Reed tot Drakenstein. I think the Malayalam Wikipedia folks will know this man, because I think they have a featured article about him. He was the person who put Malayalam words in print for the first time, I think. And what Van Reed tot Drakenstein did was he came with the Dutch East India Company. You must think about 1678. It's just after Vasco da Gama came in. Okay? And here's this man. He's a wealthy knight, a knight, which means he was from the upper echelons of society. And what he did was he wanted to document all these plants that people were using in Kerala and the Konkan coast. And he started this magnificent volumes called Hortus Malabaricus. There were 10 volumes of books. And what he did was he asked the local Ayurvedic practitioners, he asked the local people, what do you do with these plants? And then they described it. And one of them was a Brahmin, and one of them was actually what would be called an untouchable. And he didn't treat them differently. He got all of them to tell him about the knowledge that they possessed about the plants. And he had people drawing up every plant. He collected plant specimens. He took them back to Europe, got all the European scholars to look at it. And then he wrote this entire book in Latin. It's I think 12 volumes. Okay, and it was printed at a time when printing was extremely expensive. And he produced this massive volume. And you must also remember that this was done before Linnaeus. I don't know if you know about Linnaeus. So the first person who introduced the naming system for animals and plants was Carl Linnaeus. And this guy was documenting plants and animals before Linnaeus. So what were the names that he used? So he used the local names. He used the Malayalam names, he used the Konkani names, and he also got certain Latin descriptions of these things. And when Linnaeus saw these books, he described them with giving them the binomial. So when Linnaeus gave the name Cocos nucifera for the coconut, he had never seen a coconut in his life. What he had seen were pictures from Hendrik van Reed's book. Okay? Unfortunately, he was part of the Dutch East India Company, and he found out that there was a lot of corruption in the Dutch East India Company. And at some point of time, on his way back somewhere near Surat, it is suspected that he was poisoned by the Dutch East India Company people, because he had found all kinds of corrupt practices and he was on the way to Europe to report about these things. He is buried somewhere in Surat. If there's somebody from Surat here, you should find his memorial, take a photograph of it and upload it to Hendrik van Reed's article on Wikipedia, because we have none. Okay? And I would appreciate if you also read through it. It's a